Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at our virtual town hall. My name is Jade Maxwell Rodriguez, and I am pleased to be your moderator this afternoon. As this town hall is virtual and we are not all gathered in the same space, I recognize that this land acknowledgement might not be for the territory that you're currently on. I ask if this is the case, you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory that you are on and the current treaty holders. This afternoon, I'm coming from you from the lands of the Mississaugas of the Scugog Island First Nation. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tkaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peacefully share and care for the Great Lakes region. We would like to get a sense of who is participating in today's town hall. For those of you joining us by Zoom, we will be conducting a short one-question poll. If I could ask everyone who is able to complete that poll, that should now be visible on your screens. So before we get started, I'd like to review a few items with you. I'd like to note that this afternoon we have both ASL interpretation and closed captioning to support our participants at today's session. As we have done in the past, we will be recording today's virtual town hall, and the video will be posted after the event on our website, conversations.info.yorku.ca. I would also like to thank everyone who has submitted a question in advance. And I will be asking these questions after the remarks today. We've already received over 74 questions in advance. So in order to try and get through as many questions as possible and to allow for questions that are being posed live during the town hall, I will be combining questions that are similar in nature. As I mentioned, we'll be taking questions live during the town hall, and I will explain how we will do this after our presentation. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to President Lenton, who will get us started.
Thank you so much, Jade. Good afternoon. Bienvenue à tous. Bonjour. I'm pleased that once again, so many of you have been able to join us. And I know that with the fall term very fast approaching, that community members have many questions about the next transition, our next stage, to increasing the number of in-person activities on our campuses. So we look forward to answering as many questions as possible in a few minutes. But I thought I might be able to, in my opening comments, address a few very common themes that are emerging in those questions. I want to remind everyone first, from the outset of the pandemic, we have continued to work closely with the government, with other post-secondary institutions, and also, of course, public health authorities, to develop the plans that we've put in place, putting the health and safety of our community members first. Our fall plans were similarly developed, and it's therefore important for all of us to understand that York's ability to implement its plans for a gradual return to our campuses with more in-person classes, research, and other activities this fall depends on the province moving to step 4 of its roadmap to reopen. Every one of us plays a part in getting to step 4 to protect ourselves and one another. We know that the vaccines are a core component of our ability to achieve this. Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, has reminded us that the risk of contracting COVID-19 is 6.4 times higher among unvaccinated individuals. This means that if you are unvaccinated, you are at far greater risk of becoming ill yourself and seriously ill, but you're also at higher risk of transmitting the virus to others who are vulnerable. When I speak of those who are vulnerable, I'm including individuals who choose not to get vaccinated, as well as those who are not yet eligible to be vaccinated, such as children under 12 years of age, and those who cannot get vaccinated due to underlying health reasons. I strongly encourage all who are eligible, but who have not yet been vaccinated, to do so at the earliest opportunity. Assuming that the province does move into step 4 in the fall as planned, the university has taken a host of measures to protect our community against COVID-19. And we will continue to advance multiple strategies and initiatives to protect the health and safety of the community in the fall and beyond. These include launching a new automated screening tool called Vous Screen, which will require all community members to complete daily COVID-19 screening before coming to campus. Continuing to require masks indoors, which is mandated by the government. We are asking community members to bring their own masks to campus, but masks will also be available at a nominal cost from vending machines on the Keele and Glendon campuses and can be purchased with your Yorkview card. Continuing to maintain 2-meter physical distancing requirements is in place until September. The government has indicated that effective September 1st, physical distancing requirements and capacity limits are no longer expected to be in place. And while we will be endeavoring as much as possible to make maximum use of space, we will be following those guidelines come September. We've also, however, though, updated our signage across York's campuses in August and September to reflect all the changes to physical distancing requirements and to encourage community members to give others space and to avoid congregating indoors. We've been installing hospital-grade air filtration and running air systems 24/7 to improve airflow, installing plexiglass barriers and sneeze guards in central student areas and in high traffic locations, and installing foot pedal hand sanitizing stations across our campuses, along with touchless washroom entrances and faucets to allow for a contactless experience. So now the question is, what are we going to do, and are we going to get to that step 4 that is needed for these new provisions to be put in place in September? I know that many of you have been following the conversations that have been happening at provincial and local levels around vaccine mandates in various sectors. We have been closely watching overall vaccination rates across the province, which have dramatically improved in recent weeks, but are still shy of reaching the higher levels in order for the province to enter into step 4 of its reopening plan. We're also listening carefully to the perspectives and the concerns that are being raised within our community about the continued risks of the pandemic. This is why, as a member of the Council of Ontario Universities, York recently supported the call on the provincial government to declare a provincial vaccine mandate for all post-secondary campuses, along with a provincially supported COVID Safe Pass vaccine verification process. In consultations with Toronto Public Health just last week, it was clear that they are also seeing a growing justification for universities to require vaccinations for all faculty, course directors, staff, and students who are attending campuses in person. In York's case, this would be in addition to the requirement for all that who are living in our undergraduate residences to be fully vaccinated, as we announced in June. Fundamentally, we hope that the province will act and will respond to the public call by the universities. At the same time, we felt compelled to undertake the necessary planning that would allow us to maximize the number of people on our campuses who are vaccinated, and to ensure that we had in place any additional health and safety measures for individuals who were unable to be vaccinated as a result of exemptions that may apply for medical or other grounds recognized by the Ontario Human Rights Code. In moving toward this approach, there are many details to be worked out if we were to require vaccinations for all members of the community. And we're also committed to consulting with all the various constituencies at the university, including our employee groups. We also remain highly sensitive to the complex considerations surrounding the vaccine verification requirements. And we appreciate that there will be diverse viewpoints on this issue. We understand, though, that time is short. In the time that we have, we do want to be absolutely sure that we are thoughtful about the best possible approach that we are actually able to implement, especially in the absence of provincial tools, such as a vaccination passport, should the government not respond. If you look at institutions that have already made announcements, you can see that there's a continuum of the actions that they're taking. Several universities, including York, Toronto, Ryerson, Waterloo, Guelph, Laurier, Western, others, they are requiring vaccinations for those living in residence and in some cases, varsity sport. Toronto, Carleton, Waterloo, they've extended that vaccine mandate to other situations that are going to be defined as higher risk, such as in situations where masks are not easy, where masks may need to be removed. And they are also requiring individuals to attest to their vaccination status. Those who indicate no, they haven't been vaccinated, are then triaged to an educational website for rapid testing so that they are able to show that they have tested negative for COVID. How often they have to do that, once per week, 2-3 times per week, varies. On the other end of the continuum, Seneca and Ottawa have taken the position and announced that all students, faculty, instructors, staff, and visitors must be vaccinated as a condition to come onto campus and to live, work, or attend student residence with approved exceptions. In reality, with the exception of perhaps Seneca, there's not a whole lot of difference in practice between what Waterloo is doing and what Ottawa is doing, because it's only Seneca that's actually taking steps to ensure compliance. They're using a screen app and screen readers or security staff to manage determining whether or not members have an exemption or have in fact been vaccinated. Ottawa, the University of Ottawa, is using the honor system. Among other considerations in terms of implementation, the differences likely reflect the challenges that are associated with how large and how porous campuses are. In the coming days, we will be clarifying the details about how York intends to move forward with our own implementation of vaccination attestation, approved exemptions, the effective dates, relevant timelines. But we think it's important now to remind the community that if they can get vaccinated, they should go now to get vaccinated. And as we develop the details of our own policy around this, important to remember that we must adhere to provincial guidelines, to public health guidelines, as well as any legal limitations that would be in place. None of that should deter us from doing everything that we can to reach the maximum targets with vaccination. We know it is the most powerful tool that we have to fight COVID-19, especially in combination with the other safety measures that we're taking regarding masks and ventilation and so forth. I would like to reassure everyone that our approach to this kind of policy and its operationalization will prioritize education and communication within our community. The spirit of the policy would be to further safeguard our campuses to the fullest extent possible as we begin to resume our in-person and on-campus teaching, learning, research, work, social activities, and interactions with one another. So as you can see, many of us are wearing our t-shirts now to remind everybody about how important it is to get vaccinated and to ensure that vaccines remain accessible to our community. We will also be continuing to partner with Humber River Hospital to offer a series of vaccine clinics on the Kiel campus, beginning the week of August 23rd and running until mid-September. The specific dates and times of the clinics, as well as their exact locations, will be shared shortly. If you are undecided or you have questions about the safety of vaccines, I want to remind you that there is a list of credible resources on this topic on the Better Together website. We have already received a number of questions from students, staff, faculty, and course directors in anticipation of today's town hall. And I want to now turn it over to that process to see if we can try to answer as many questions as people might have. Thank you very much. Merci, miigwech. I should just mention while Jade is getting ready to take questions that I want to remind folks that we do have a special advisor on our academic continuity planning and COVID-19 response, Associate Professor Dr. Parissa Safai, and she is in the School of Kinesiology and Health, and she's joined us today as well as the other members of the VP team to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that, President Lenton. Yes, I was having a momentary technical difficulty, so I will resort to not using a virtual background at the moment. So if I could invite the members of the senior administration to turn on their cameras and to join us for the Q&A portion. So Lisa Phillips, our Provost and Vice President Academic, Amir Asif, Vice President Research and Innovation, Sheila Cote-Meek, Vice President People, Equity and Culture, Carol McCauley, Vice President Finance and Administration, Lucy Fromwitz, Vice Provost Students, and Parissa Safai, Special Advisor to the President for Academic Continuity Planning and COVID-19 Response, as well as an Associate Professor in the School of Kinesiology and Health Science. So if you have a question for the panel, and I see many people have already started to use our Q&A function in Zoom, please feel free to enter your question. And if you're watching via YouTube, you can send your question through our dedicated email address, conversations@yorku.ca. Our moderating team will continue to monitor the Q&A, and there may be some questions that are going to be asked live during the town hall. If your question is selected, you will be notified and your microphone will be turned on so that you may ask your question to the panel. And as I mentioned, we have enabled the upvoting feature, and I also see that's also being used as the president was giving remarks. So if you see a question that has been posted live that you would like to see answered, you can vote for that question, and we will do our very best to answer as many questions as we possibly can during today's session. So let's first jump to a question that we received by email prior to the town hall, and it comes to us from Kate, who's a staff member. And the question is, when do you anticipate that external visitors, such as prospective students, will be permitted to visit the campuses? And will there be a university-wide system in place to track this data, or will individual departments or units be required to keep a record of those external visits?
Parissa, I wonder if maybe you're the best person to respond to that, or Lisa?
Thank you. I will begin. The YU screen, which is the automated screening tool that will be coming on board. It'll go live very shortly, we're hoping, within a week's time, is the tool that we will be asking all those who want to come to campus, including guests and visitors, to fill in prior to coming to campus. So this will be for students, staff, faculty, instructors, and visitors. And that particular tool is absolutely critical. It is required as part of the guidance from the provincial government and Toronto Public Health. However, with regards to visitors, I want to be sensitive to the fact that it does differ a little bit when we think about some of the different places or spaces on our campus. For example, we have non-York research partners, and then so our colleagues, our research faculty members, and our other researchers will have their own policies in place with regards to those guests. We may have also different policies and regulations in place for those living within residences. So depending upon your specific context and what your particular sort of question is, I do encourage and invite you to connect with an individual either in your program unit or your faculty, depending upon what situation you're finding yourself in.
Thank you for that, Parissa. We've received a number of questions from community members about masks. So if we could just focus on that as a theme for the next 3 questions. So the first question is, could you clarify where masks will be required on our campuses, both indoors and outdoors?
So what I will say is that my understanding of the provincial guidelines is that masks are required indoors. There is a provision that for course instructors or faculty members who are actually delivering the lecture when they are the 2 meters away from the students that are in the class, that they're able to remove their masks, as you sometimes see the premier and others doing when they come up to the microphone to actually be able to deliver the lecture and be heard clearly. I want to go to Parissa about outdoors, because it's my understanding that masks are not necessarily required outdoors, but I'm going to defer to her.
Thank you so very much, President Linton. So currently right now, masks are required indoors and outdoors if you cannot maintain 2 meters of physical distance. And what will happen, as communicated by the Ministry of Colleges and Universities and as supported by Toronto Public Health, the mask mandate will continue for fall, at least fall 2021, which is as far as the provincial and public health guidance goes too. In outdoor spaces, they do not reference anything about a mask mandate. Nonetheless, masks are inexpensive and non-intrusive ways with which to just add to your own health and safety as well as to the health and safety of others. That said, indoor spaces, it is a must. Once you come indoors and where there's a situation where that there may be other individuals around you or near you, you must have a mask on.
I wanted to emphasize something about how we think about our campuses, because of course, York is increasingly a campus that's integrated, like you might think of Ryerson or the U of T integrated into the downtown, because we have 2 subways that are on our campuses and people will come up and disembark from the subways. And so, when we talk about our campuses, we really do have to differentiate between people who may be on the land versus people who are accessing our buildings. And our buildings are very clearly, York property, and those are our community members and managing, how many people we have who are coming in terms of, and also that, when we talk about the wearing of masks and so forth. So I think we can talk about invited visitors and that our rules would apply to invited visitors. But people who simply disembark from the subway, who may not even necessarily have any relationship to the university, to some extent, that's a very different and challenging situation.
Thank you for that. So the next question related to masking is, what is the protocol for students who refuse to wear a mask in the classroom or in the lab? What resources are available to the instructor? Is there a hotline or advice or someone they can call if they encounter challenges?
Lisa, would you want to take that or?
Sure, I'll certainly be happy to start, and I may ask Parissa to fill in. There are some really important legal frameworks to be aware of here. We really cannot ask an individual, why they're not wearing a mask, or tell a specific individual, put a mask on, a mask is required. People do have medical exemptions from masks in some cases, and their personal medical information is private. What we can do is educate as a group, a class, about the requirements for health and safety and the fact that we need to be respectful of people who may have an exemption. We have some really good resources up on the YU Better Together website under the Community of Care commitment. There's a website to, a link to a document called Clear Pathways, and it is really providing some tips and some suggestions about how one might deal with situations where anxiety or even conflict is erupting in a classroom around how different people are following health protocols. So I really recommend checking that out. Our Division of Students, I understand, has prepared some videos that will be loaded onto eClass that will be a resource that an instructor can show in class, can direct their students to, really reviewing what the requirements are for everyone. The fact that you have been vaccinated is very, very good, but it does not exempt you from the mask requirement unless you have one of those medical exemptions. Everyone must wear a mask unless they have a medical exemption, if they are indoors, unless they are an instructor who's a full 6 feet away, who's instructing and takes their mask off for that reason. I would finally just mention that there is actually on the YU Better Together website, there's a contact us email, a general email address that anyone can use. I urge you to actually resort first to your local area, your local manager, your local department office, your faculty office, for guidance that may be available. But if you're having trouble getting some guidance, and that could be the case because we haven't got the definitive guidance yet from the ministry, that's still to come in the balance of this month. And so there will be more information that becomes available. But that contact us email is available to any member of the community who would like to send a question in that's on their mind that they're having trouble finding the answers to. And we'll do our very best to point you in the right direction. Parissa, did you want to add anything?
If I may, just to simply echo, once again, the regulations do make clear that masks and face coverings are required within post-secondary. And so that is our default position. And what we are trying to do is always assume in the first instance where there may be a conflict, a miscommunication, is please engage in dialogue, please engage in education. And where possible for faculty instructors who will be working with their students, please consider in your first few lectures, just reminding students of either viewing those videos on eClass or just reminding themselves of all the signage that is located. But nonetheless, the mandate is quite clear from the province as well as from Toronto Public Health. We will be expecting all of our community members to be wearing a mask indoors.
I just want to clarify because of the just some confusion that we sometimes get into. Some of us refer to 2 meters and some of us refer to 6 feet. And there's sometimes confusion that we've said 2 feet. So it's 2 meters or 6 feet, which is about the same. And, again, we're not yet in step 4. And we have to really keep straight the fact that right now, there are different regulations in place. We are talking predominantly about what is in effect come September, I think it's September 1st, if I'm not mistaken. And that's assuming that we're moving to step 4. And in that stage, then we have these new regulations where the social distancing is no longer a requirement, but social masking is. And so if you cannot maintain the social masking, or if you've got a course instructor who's trying to lecture, especially to a larger class, then the course instructor should be 6 feet or 2 meters away. Because if you can't mask, you want to make sure that you've got the distance. I think that's a really important thing, that it's the combination of all of the safety features, not having to have everything in place at every particular minute. It is ensuring that we reach those levels of vaccination. the best protection that each of us has is that we are vaccinated. And then the more people that are vaccinated. Now, I'm going to say something specifically to a person that's writing in the chat, Gregory Giovanni. The tone of some of your messages is not acceptable. And I understand very well that some people, especially those opposed perhaps to vaccination, feel passionately and strongly about that. And that's why, as an institution, one of the reasons why we're going to be looking very closely at how we can accommodate individuals who, for medical reasons, for religious reasons, potentially conscientious objectors, that they have special exemption, but there need to be alternatives. The whole point here is that you put in place as many safety guards as possible so that as a community, we are putting health and safety first. And if you can't be respectful in your comments, I am going to ask the tech team to have you removed from this town hall. So please understand that. I will not tolerate that, the kinds of messages that you've been putting into the chat.
So I'd like to move to the highest upvoted question right now. And the question is, does this mean if Ontario does not move to stage 4 by September, will we all remain remote, including staff? And if so, when will this decision be communicated?
Parissa? Lisa?
Thank you so very much. I'll start first by just acknowledging that just earlier today just yesterday, there was some conversation with, some remarks offered by the Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, to suggest that they're anticipating further reduction of restrictions shortly, within the next 10 to 11 days. I'll just put a pin in that just as a point of information for all attendees in the town hall. However, if nonetheless by September 7, we are not in a position where provincially we're at step 4, we are still able to move forward given that our planning approach has been very much thoughtful and based around considerations of continued physical distancing. Please don't get me wrong, there may be impacts that we cannot yet anticipate, and we will need to work with our faculties, our units and divisions if that is the case. However, we continue to get reassurance from the province as well as from public health that we remain on track, even with the increasing numbers of the cases, even though we know the Delta variant is very worrisome. But nonetheless, I do want to reiterate the message that was shared by President Lenton at the beginning of the town hall. The most significant and substantive way that we can ensure that we get to step 4 and beyond in a manner that is healthful for all is through vaccinations, as well as also observance and compliance with health and safety regulations while on campus. We have many tools available to us, which we will be operationalizing, but it requires all of us working collectively.
I add just a nuance to that. Thank you, Parissa. And the nuance is that if we should be unsuccessful as a province in moving into step 4, and that would mean that tighter regulations would remain in place for a longer period of time, we may need to make some adjustments to what we do in fall. Our planning really has been done on the basis that we're able to move into step 4. That doesn't necessarily mean we would immediately flip to all remote learning the way we had to at the start of the pandemic. We would look to scale back if we had to comply with public health regulations, which has always been our promise, that the planning is just a plan and it's always subject to change to the extent we have to change it in order to keep people safe and comply with public health regulations.
Thank you for that. We do have a number of questions from about vaccines, which I'm going to try my very best to combine. So we've had a couple of questions around, could we insist that everyone on campus attest to their vaccine status to ensure the safety of those individuals who are working on campus or attending campus to study, especially those that have small children at home that cannot be vaccinated? And also a question around an explanation as to why we can't require vaccines, as the school board does require in the K-12 setting vaccines for a certain set of requirements,
So
and how this might be different.
Let me just say that one of the consultations that we're undertaking in Ontario, and actually even through Universities Canada, but especially in Ontario, is to consult and to get a legal update on what we can and cannot do. We obviously have to comply with the law, but we're trying to understand then what are we able to do while complying with the law as it stands. At the end of today, in fact, we're having another meeting with COU, with the Chief Medical Officer, with a legal update to see what is allowable. We believe that asking people to attest that they have been vaccinated is acceptable, and then having them, if the answer is no, what a number of other universities have done now is that individual who is answering no would be triaged to a website with information about the vaccinations from an educative point of view, but then also, for example, to how you would need to get then a test to demonstrate that you were negative for COVID before coming onto campus. So this is some of the combinations of tools that can be implemented, especially understanding that there will be some individuals who are not able to get vaccinated, who have medical conditions, for example. And so how do you accommodate those individuals? So that's a model that I'm pretty sure both Waterloo and Ottawa are actually using, even though Ottawa has stated in a much more forceful way that they're going to require that they are using the honor system. And so that because of course, unless we have provincial tools on confirmation, all universities are hampered here. That's why we really called on the government to come up with the tool. So we can absolutely, we believe, ask people to attest, have them, be triaged, and then think about what accommodations we would be prepared to make for individuals who are not able to get vaccinated.
Thank you. Then the next question that I have that is related to vaccines is, which vaccines do we consider to be valid? Do they need to be Canadian approved vaccines?
Most of the universities that are going down this path and exploration are purporting to either accept Canadian federally approved vaccinations or vaccinations approved by WHO. And again, I want to emphasize that we are in the throes of looking at all of these details and looking what others have done so that we can learn from that. But I think it would be our inclination to go down that path, to accept any vaccination approved by either Canada or by WHO.
If I could just add to that, President Lynn, with the requirement for resident vaccines, we are accepting any WHO approved vaccine. But to clarify for any of our international students who will be arriving in Canada, Canada has required that it be one of the Canadian accepted vaccines. So students arriving vaccinated with a WHO approved but non-Canadian approved, one of the four, will still have to quarantine, and we will continue to work with the students to place them in quarantine and care for them during that period.
Thank you for that, Lucy. Next, I have a number of questions that have come in from faculty members about the classroom. And so the first question is, how will the classroom be sanitized? And is there an option for faculty members to have a personalized microphone to ensure that it is properly sanitized?
Parissa, did you want to take that, or Carol? Maybe
Parissa, maybe you could start, and if I'll just anything I could add.
Yeah, thank you so very much. And sorry for the little bit of delay there. I've just received a point of clarification with regards to masks for instructors. So President Lenton, with your permission, I'd like to clarify that point. We've double checked and reinforced this with our contacts at Toronto Public Health, and then move to that question about how classroom technology will be sanitized. So I just want to confirm that all are expected, including instructors, to be wearing masks during classes. However, if there are faculty or instructors who are in need of an accommodation, that process can be facilitated through existing EWB processes, and that will be the process by which we can accommodate them not wearing a mask. But according to Toronto Public Health, all are required to be wearing a mask in the classroom. And so my apologies for not having that quite clear before, but I can confirm that that has been vetted with our connections in Toronto Public Health. And with regards to the cleaning of classroom equipment, our first top priority is around, of course, air exchange, air circulation. Nonetheless, our classroom spaces will be cleaned daily, and all of those sort of pieces of equipment, high-touch surfaces will also be cleaned. And so attention will be paid to tops of keyboards and microphones within the classrooms.
A question was raised about the microphones, Parissa, and I don't know whether or not we've looked into the possibility of assigning, an individual microphone to each faculty member that they would, basically carry with them. That's something that we could take away. I'm not, just to weigh that against the cleaning of the microphone. So thank you for that question, and we'll look into it.
Thank you.
The next question is, Toronto Public Health requires that we provide education to students, staff, and visitors about COVID-19. Could we have someone share with faculty members this information that might be provided at orientation or other events, so that it could also be shared in those first few classes to explain the guidelines to students?
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no reason why an instructor can't play one of the educational videos or review the health protocols as part of their first class activities. That would be absolutely fine. What we want to discourage is singling students out. But group instruction and reminders and education is absolutely great. And if the first class is a good moment to do that, then for sure, that's totally fine.
So Lisa, where can faculty members or course instructors get easy access to a video, educational video, or some notes on that?
The You Better Together website obviously has lots of resources. And then I understand that eClass will actually have some videos loaded into it. Lucy, do you have any more details about exactly how that will work?
So we are currently producing a number of different videos. And we will gladly post them at our website, Vice-Provost students. We'll make them available through all the dean's offices, and we'll also share them with the academic advisors. So there's lots of different ways. We also share that if a faculty member would like to invite us into the classroom to spend a few minutes talking about this, we do have a public health nurse on staff and other resources that can be called upon if it's something that a faculty member would like.
President Lenton, if I may add, as part of the conflict resolution document that is posted on the You Better Together website, on the webpage entitled The Community of Care Commitment, the document, which also outlines conversational prompts in case there may be some conflict, as well as also first point of contact. There's also a section there that is available for faculty instructors on suggested language for syllabi for consideration, all of which identify very clearly what are the health and safety requirements for York. And that could be just simply cut and pasted or into either the syllabus or an introductory lecture. So those resources are also available.
Thank you for that. The next theme that we're going to explore, we've received a number of questions from students about services available to them. The first question is, how is York University supporting students experiencing anxiety related to the pandemic and their studies?
Lucy, do you want to take that?
Yes, thank you. First of all, we understand that there are many students. It has been a very difficult year where we've repeatedly heard about staying at home, not mixing, etc. So the idea of re-engaging in classes, etc., can be anxiety-ridden. So we do appreciate that. And so thank you for the question. And please understand that there's many students that likely feel the same way as you. Our Student Counseling, Health and Wellbeing Office will be present on campus and continue to offer remote counseling. We have no wait lines. We will provide same-day appointments, whether in person or remote. We're also providing at that website a number of tools, a number of ways that students can prepare for attending classes, etc. And we're developing workshops and group opportunities so students can engage in small groups to explore some solutions to mitigate the anxiety. And we continue to offer, of course, all of our services in remote as well as in person. For any of our students who are remaining in a remote environment and perhaps outside Canada, we do have 24/7 counseling services available in multi-languages, and you can access that information. It's called Keep Me Safe through our Counseling, Health and Wellbeing website. But it's a really important question, and I really appreciate it being asked.
Thank you for that, Lucy. The next question is, how will students who are experiencing COVID-like symptoms be accommodated for missing in-person classes, labs, and tutorials?
Lisa or Lucy, do you want to take that?
I'll start and then invite anyone else. In the same way that during any other time, if a student is ill and they cannot attend class, they're in touch with their instructor, and the instructor can help them. However, we also ask that that student complete the Vous screening tool. That way, if they are experiencing symptoms, we will be in touch with them. You will get a call from us, whether you have been on campus or whether you just have questions about the symptoms. We will help guide you to public health information and work with you to support you as best we can. If you are a student who lives on campus, we will also move you into a private suite. We'll ensure that we're delivering food to you 3 times a day, and we'll check in with you twice a day, once with a health check, once with a wellness check. Sometimes it just ends up being a cold or a bit of flu, and once you're through that, you simply move back into your room. If testing is necessary, we will also work with you to ensure that you're able to have a COVID test. So we'll help with the transportation to the testing and back to the campus.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Could I just add that from an instructor perspective, I know instructors are also wondering how, what do I need to be doing to assist students who can't come to campus for a reason like that if they're in a course that is being taught in person. Our policies actually do call on instructors to provide reasonable alternative access to materials when students are not able to attend for reasons related to the COVID disruption or any disruption. It has to be reasonable for both the student and the instructor. So students should not necessarily expect that in every in-person course, if they have to miss a day, that they would be, zoomed in, or that there would be fully recorded lectures. Instructors will be having some discretion about what's reasonable for them to do in order to accommodate those who cannot be in the class. So if you are a student who knows now that you're going to have difficulty coming to campus, I strongly recommend that you enroll in remote learning courses rather than in-person courses. You cannot assume that an in-person course will also be available in a hybrid format or fully online. That's just not an assumption you can make. So if you don't want to have to come to campus, I would recommend that at this point you start to look now at what courses you could enroll in that are remote. We do have a really good mix, so there should be other choices available for you if you prefer not to come to campus.
Thank you for that, Lisa. We also had a couple questions from students who wanted to know what kind of space will be made available for students who have both an online course and an in-person course on the same day in a short period of time and are not able to travel home for their online course.
Yeah, Parissa, did you want to talk a bit about the planning around that?
Yes, thank you so very much. I'll start first with our quiet study spaces within our libraries. The tremendous team within the libraries have been extraordinarily, both since the start of the pandemic and both with regards to fall planning, to ensure that there will be quiet study space available. However, for the question, which is about those students who are maybe caught between an in-person and a remote offering, there's absolutely an awareness that they will need to be able to have a space which is quiet, but also is somewhere where they'll be able to participate online. We're in the processes of just trying to land and lock in those types of spaces across the campuses, and then we'll start and proceed with the communications in order to make that available or aware for individuals. Where do you go? Where possible, we're also trying to ensure that we're working closely with our faculties and units so that they too can be attentive to their students in their programs at the local level. So please stay tuned. More information is coming, but it is certainly one of the things that we're very sensitive to.
Finally, on this theme, we've had a couple of questions about fall convocation as well as spring convocation in 2022 and whether we can share with students what our expectations will be in terms of delivery for convocation.
So for fall convocation, we are looking at whether or not there might be even more creative kinds of activities than we've had to date that would allow not the big convocation inside, everyone is on stage together, but that would allow graduates to maybe come onto campus for pictures, for example, to do some additional activities that would, help really with the celebration of this important milestone. Full convocations are not expected to be possible in the fall, but we are certainly hoping that we might be able to have in-person convocations by next spring of 2022.
Thank you for that, President Lenton. I'm now going to turn to a series of questions that came from staff in terms of returning to the office. Can you outline cleaning protocols that will be followed within office spaces and whether staff are expected to provide their own PPE, i.e. masks and hand sanitizers?
I don't know if that's Sheila or Parissa.
Parissa, go ahead. Thank you.
No problem. I think this is a great time to plug our top 12 ways information. There's an infographic as well as also more detailed information that has just been recently updated on the Why You Better Together website. In that top 12, we have made greater effort to describe our cleaning protocols. Again, I come back to a comment I've already raised, is that our top priority is around air, ventilation, and air exchange. And we've come to better understand transmission route for COVID-19. We will still maintain, a wonderful standard of cleaning so that there's daily cleaning of different types of spaces. There's opportunity for service requests for more terminal cleaning if individuals, staff, employees, instructors, faculty require. And that's already part and parcel of our existing university protocols. Faculties and units have been provided with information on how they themselves can get sanitization supplies. And those are there's a number of different initiatives behind the scenes to ensure, from the government, excuse me, on how to get all of this equipment to different areas across the university. And so we're engaging with our executive officers, with different facility managers to ensure that it's ticked off appropriately. Nonetheless, in general, what we have to think about is not just what can be done from a centralized manner, but what us individually we can do ourselves. There will be hand sanitizing stations all across our campuses. Hand hygiene will be absolutely promoted. And if there are cleaning supplies readily available to you, and they should be, then please do consider cleaning everything as you're moving in order to keep yourself and others in your area that much safer. So please, once again, that top 12 site, that page has much more concrete, detailed information than what I've shared here.
Could I perhaps just speak to the issue of whether instructors are required to bring their own masks? We're asking everyone actually to bring their own masks to campus. Students will receive a single, I believe a single or perhaps two triple layer cotton masks when they first arrive on campus. But we think at this point in the pandemic, masks are pretty pervasive. People have their own masks. We are asking people to bring their own masks. As a backup option, we will have vending machines on campus where for a nominal charge, individuals can go and secure a mask. If you lose it, if it's soiled, if for whatever reason you need to procure a mask on campus, they will be available.
Thank you for that, Lisa. The next question is, will staff be required to use sick time or staff or faculty be required to use sick time when their children are sent home from school for COVID symptoms, for exposure, or if the school moves back to remote learning?
Sheila, are you able to help us on that?
I could start. I did consult with HR on the question, and I understand that some staff do have eligibility for up to 10 sick days to care for family members, attend appointments, etc. But I think we haven't addressed really the overall policy. So I don't know if Parissa has anything further to add to that.
Not at this time, but I'm happy to take that back to HR and part of the CPR team to flush that out. Absolutely.
I might just also add that it's also important to talk to your supervisor and manager, if there's accommodations that need to be made. So for instance, family accommodations or medical accommodations. We do have policies around accommodations. So thank you for the question.
Thank you for that, Sheila. And the next question is, will building capacities remain the same, or do new regulations allow for reduced capacities? And how will capacity limits in high and low traffic areas be regulated?
So assuming that the government moved into step 4 in the fall, the capacity limitations have been removed. So right now we have capacity limitations in place, but that is one of the requirements that is no longer in effect come September 1st. Parissa, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you very much. And I simply want to add, you are referring to the guidance from the province. And in response to a question that was raised elsewhere, I simply want to communicate we've had multiple conversations with public health, and they are going to assume a position consistent with that provincial guidance. Nonetheless, our planning approach for the fall has remained materially unchanged. So we will still move forward with our measured and gradual return to our campuses. And so it will not be like pre-pandemic times with hustle and bustle, lots of that on our campuses, sadly not. But because of our concern and our vigilance around health and safety, we will still continue to have this very measured approach. If I may, I will add once again a reminder about the YU Screen tool. The tool is not just superficial. It is required, mandated, but it is also it's one of the most valuable elements that we have with regards to contact tracing and case management. And the data also gives us line of sight on the numbers of individuals, on our campuses on a daily basis. So that is one of a number of tools that we will be utilizing to make sure we have line of sight on the number of individuals on our campuses daily and how and where they may be moving.
Thank you, Parissa. The next question has come to us live, and the question is, given some of the comments that have already been vocalized in the Q&A and in the chat today by people who are in attendance, are there additional safety measures being put in place to ensure campus safety? There's a concern about the faction of radicalized or misinformation that is being spread by individuals resorting to violence in the name of academic freedom.
So, I started off my remarks by outlining the range of items that we're putting in place to protect health and safety from a COVID-19 perspective. The question seems to be not necessarily so much about that as about conflict emerging on the campus. Is that how I read that question?
That's how I read it, in terms of people who, don't necessarily agree with the university's position or how safety protocols are being enforced, and how do we deal with individuals who have a differing view of how this should be transacted.
At the end of the day, no matter what position universities or colleges are taking, everyone understands that there is a component of voluntary goodwill, some refer to it as the honor system, that of people looking after themselves, but looking after one another. And even if one has personal views, the goal here that might be contrary to where the university is heading, we know that we're not going to obtain 100% of vaccination. There will be people who, for medical reasons, cannot get vaccinated. But as it has been laid out by public health authorities very clearly, it is our best defense if we reach certain thresholds that will protect everyone. And so we will have to, one of the tasks that we're looking at right now is what is a reasonable way to accommodate people who have acceptable exemptions, based on the Human Rights Code or whatever. And how do we accommodate those people so that others are comforted that they have been tested and we know that they've got a negative COVID-19 result test. And so we're hoping to move forward in a way that's community-based, looking after one another, educative-based, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where people are going to be in conflict with one another. That's obviously not going to be very conducive to who we are as a community, but never mind moving beyond COVID-19. And we all know, when it's been fairly well documented now, because of variants and potentially uncertainty around longevity of the impact of the vaccines and potentially the need for boosters, we're going to be living with COVID-19 for a very long time. And being able to protect ourselves from the worst of COVID-19 so that it comes to be viewed like the flu, unpleasant, perhaps ill, but not life-threatening, is something that's going to require all of us working together collectively as a community that cares for one another. Now, if it becomes necessary, and I certainly hope it does not, that people respond in ways that are physical or verbally threatening, we have the mechanisms on this campus, on our campuses right now, to respond to that behavior. We have disciplinary action regarding employees and course instructors and faculty. We have student code of conduct. So, I'm not expecting individual faculty members or course directors to take on these issues themselves that would not be helpful, frankly. But there needs to be a way to report any incidences that happen so that we can follow up as we would if that kind of behavior occurred on any kind of topic or matter.
Thank you for that. The next question comes from a staff member. In light of the increased numbers of the Delta variant, is the university still contemplating a full in-person return in January 2022? And at what point would the university community be informed of what our plans will be for the winter term?
We've been trying very hard to make sure that we don't surprise any of either our students or our staff or faculty members or course instructors, because we appreciate everybody at this point, has personal plus work considerations that they have to be thinking about. So we would be endeavoring to make a call like we have been doing several weeks, potentially at least a month in advance of the fall of the winter term. But I don't want to make the call too soon. September, October, especially October, end of October, early November, it's going to be a very important time for the Toronto as a region, but more generally Ontario, to see how we're doing around the variants and vaccination. And so rather than call something too early, we always want to be informed by as much evidence and data as we can. So at the moment, we are still optimistic and hopeful that we will be able to continue this conservative path to gradually reopening and having, there's clearly going to be a demand for some online, some remote, far beyond the pandemic, the impact of the pandemic, but that we can continue to shift back to our default at the university, which is an in-person university in the January term. But if given the variant and given how progress is being made on the vaccinations, if we have to pivot, if we have to slow down, we will.
Thank you for that, President Linton. We have a couple of questions about the classroom. And the first question is, what protocols must be in place in classrooms where musical instruments are being played or singing is taking place?
Parissa?
Could I just start off by saying that up until now, the province actually has had quite specific regulations about how that kind of activity, musical instruments, singing, what extra PPE and distancing and protections are needed for that to occur in person. And so I believe those same guidelines remain in place until otherwise instructed by the province. But I am happy to be corrected by Parissa.
No, thank you so very much. You do have it absolutely spot on. We await to see if they will update that guidance. At this point in time, it's quite clear they're requiring certain additional certain additional space for physical distancing, plexiglass barriers, or particular types of covers on some instruments. I don't anticipate that changing, frankly, but we await that extra specific guidance from the province, hopefully sometime soon. I will add, I have to say, in working with my colleagues from AMPD, they have excellent protocols in place, and they're extraordinarily diligent about keeping their community, students, staff, faculty, instructors safe.
Rhonda, Madam President, I might just add, I've been updated by our Associate Vice President of Facilities that we have added additional HEPA filter units in those rooms that are typically for practice. Some are movable, some are fixed, but with the clear intent that there be additional filtering of air in those practice rooms and instruction rooms where instruments are being used or voice.
Thank you for that. The next question is, please describe what a faculty or instructor is supposed to do if there are students in the classroom that are obviously not well, coughing or sneezing, but refuse to leave the class.
So perhaps I'll start if that's all right, Rhonda?
Yes, please do.
First of all, it bears repeating that we cannot really order people out of our classrooms because we are concerned that they may not be following health protocols. That's not something we can do. It's potentially discriminatory. It is potentially putting someone on the spot about their personal medical information, which is a matter of privacy. So that's not something we can do. We can educate, and we can also, contact others for advice in difficult situations. We have the conflict resolution guidelines that have been popped into the chat as a link. We also have a variety of people who can help to talk over situations and help to provide some strategies that might be helpful in that situation. Parissa, do you want to add something, or Lucy?
Lucy, please go ahead.
The only thing I will add is, again, for the instructor to remind everyone in the class to fill out the Vous screening tool. And then through that tool, as they tell us of any symptoms, we will be in contact with those students directly. Turn it over to you, Parissa.
Thank you so very much. I wanted to add, again, in that conflict resolution pathways document, there is reference that our campus security team, our community safety team, they are available 24/7 in those situations that have been described in this question, which is quite dramatic. It's quite at one end of the continuum. And we're hoping that with communication, education, and dialogue, we don't reach those particular situations. But nonetheless, the remarkable folks in community safety are available to support anyone in our community 24/7. And we'll also share too, we also have other existing and established policies at the university, including our Code of Student Rights and Responsibilities, for example, and our team in OSCAR, the Office of Student Community Relations, can also be a very valuable resource in those dramatic, in the case of the dramatic example that was shared.
Thank you for that. The next set of questions relate to student events. And so the questions are, what can students expect for those first year incoming students as it relates to Frosh Week, as well as will students have the opportunity to participate in in-person club events or meetings, and where they'll be tabling this year?
Okay, turn that over to Lucy.
Thank you. We are currently working with our YODA group, that is the York Orientation Directors Association, and we're creating a framework planning with the principals. This is going to help them as they are planning their events. And of course, we're planning a variety of events. So the first simple answer is yes, there will be events during Frosh Week. For those of you in remote environments, there's going to be lots of remote events. And in fact, of course, our larger events will be delivered in a remote format. But at both our Glendon campus and at the Kiel campus, there's a number of events being planned. Things like movie nights, scavenger hunts, tours of the campus by our academic colleagues, as well as the Division of Students and our Glendon colleagues. Glendon is also offering Jumpstart. There will be international welcomes for our international students at both Kiel and the Glendon campus. The majority of these events are going to be outdoors and are going to be relatively small in scale. And we're providing a framework so that our student organizations who want to be doing a lot of this terrific work will have the guidelines. We'll know how large an event can be, the times, we're working with our organizations, for example, to respect the timeline so that something ends on time and those students can leave the campus and another group can participate. York 101 is also coming up. So the answer is yes. We also know our student organizations are quite anxious to get back into their offices and to be planning, and we are working with them as well. On the tabling, we are planning for small event tabling, so it won't be large scale. And we're fortunate in the early days of classes, weather permitting, it's nice out. As much as possible, we will have tabling outside. We will have them at particular distances so that students won't be congregating in groups around those tables. So we're finding the balance between helping students have that sense of belonging and getting into the mindset of class through remote formats, as well as in smaller groups, those who can attend and want to attend in person. So thanks for that question.
Thank you for that, Lucy. A question that has been posed live in the Q&A is, what is York's strategy for rapid testing and contact tracing on campus? They cite the University of Waterloo as having developed a contact tracing app for everyone on campus. And so they would just like to hear a little bit more about what is happening here at York.
Yes, we similarly have been actively engaged in how best to manage contact tracing, and maybe I'll turn it over to others who've been more heavily engaged in what that's going to look like. Parissa, sure.
Thank you very much. The YU Screen or U Screen app, that is part of our contact tracing approach. And so that is why we are requiring all who are wanting to come to campus to fill in their screening questions prior to coming to campus. And this applies to all students, staff, faculty, instructors, and guests. So that information helps support our contact tracing or management efforts. We have a team of individuals who are helping to support international students. We have a team of individuals who are helping to support our students, our non-international students. We have a team of individuals who are helping to support staff, faculty, and instructors. So these case contact managers are available. They're currently in the process of just increasing their onboarding and their learning and are ready to go. So that is certainly a key portion we have in place, a key piece, excuse me. With regards to rapid testing, we are participating in the province's provincial antigen screening program. We will have sites on both Keele and Glendon campuses for those individuals who are asymptomatic and who are in need of a rapid test. Our program at this point in time is quite focused, and so we will be focusing it to those individuals who are in high interaction public-facing roles, including students, staff, faculty, etc. This may change, and so we don't know yet. I do want to make clear, no one will be turned away if they are asymptomatic and would like a test at either Keele or Glendon campuses. If you are symptomatic, you will be directed, however, but please don't come to campus, first and foremost. And then next, we will have links to where to go for your closest COVID-19 assessment center.
Thank you for that. The next question also comes to us from the live Q&A. And the individual is asking, they have a family member who is considered high risk and they are not comfortable coming in to work. And given this type of environment, what kind of accommodations are in place, or what procedures should this individual follow? And for anybody else who's watching the town hall, should they find themselves in this type of situation where there's a concern that they might have about their coming to campus for work?
I probably can't resist saying that the very best thing to do if you are someone who can get vaccinated, especially if you have someone at home who cannot be, is for yourself to get vaccinated. But in addition, we do have, as the VP Equity, People and Culture mentioned a bit earlier, family accommodation that people can apply for. I'm not sure if that would fall under that, Sheila. Maybe you can give some advice if that might be the best avenue to go to.
Yes, thanks, Rhonda, for that. It would likely be family accommodation. And so the EWB office would be working closely with the person that would be requesting the accommodation, along with the manager and or the associate dean's office, to ensure, that staff or faculty who require the accommodation could be accommodated. So it's best to work through the process. I believe there was actually a communication that just came out today about the process changing slightly. So I would encourage you to go back to some of that information, unless Parissa, you have that top of mind at this point.
No, I'm so sorry. It's not off the top of my head. Apologies.
That's okay. I understand.
So we have a number of questions that have come in on the live chat around staff members returning to campus, and some concerns raised that they feel that the timeline is rushed, and also just some concerns about the fact that different departments are requiring a different number of days where they would be working on campus versus remotely. And I'm wondering if the panel could speak to those concerns.
So, when we approach the issue of thinking about the gradual reopening and understanding that we were going to have an increasing number of our students, as well as potentially faculty and staff on our campuses, we are a service organization, institution, and we do need to be where our students are. And we turned, in addition to when we were thinking about how to essentially increase activities and services, both remotely, but also in person, we looked at a fair amount of the research that was coming out around best practice and to really try to follow those best practice guidelines in a pilot. We thought, let's do a pilot first of all for this year. We were initially, I think, hoping we could just do the pilot just in fall, and that could help inform, winter. I think that we've come to appreciate that it might be hard to do much of a transition for winter, even if there's increased activity. So, it might be the case that we're not able to do much more than some tweaking, based on a preliminary survey of our staff in the fall, and really take the time to learn what's working and what's not working for our community, both from the people that are offering the services, but also from the people who are receiving the services. And I think some of the really important principles that emerged in the early research on working remotely is that just because some staff can work remotely doesn't mean that they should work remotely. I think that's a really important principle. Just because people can work in person also doesn't necessarily mean that they should work in person. You've got to think about how we can best meet the needs of our staff and our other employee groups, but also how can we meet the needs of our students and our faculty and our staff who are getting those services? How can we ensure that we're creating and protecting that sense of community of practice? We all know what it's been like operating all the time in Zoom and trying to balance creating that sense of community that if you've got some people potentially in person and some people on Zoom, there's also equity issues that emerge because there will be some individuals, some staff who cannot do their job from home. And so is it equitable that, we don't look at this from the point of view of everybody needing to contribute to some level around the kind of community that we want on our campuses? We made a decision based on looking at that early research and the issues of equity, the issues of creating community, serving our students, as well as trying to support the individual preferences of staff, and sort of landed on 3 days a week as a kind of a principle, as a pilot that would give us, kind of a gradual balance between in-person on campuses and working remotely, with the commitment that we would then survey and learn from that and see where we would go in subsequent years. There's been, of course, interest in establishing a remote work policy that would extend even beyond the pandemic. So we have a lot that we need to learn from what really works well for all of our stakeholders. I don't know if any members of the team want to add anything to that.
Thank you for that, President Lenton. Remarkably, we have reached the end of our town hall. We received over 330 questions. So there are definitely questions that we're not able to address during the session today, but those questions will be forwarded to the appropriate department for an answer if you've provided us your contact information. As well, we will be updating our Q&A page on our Better Together website to reflect some of the most common questions that we've received at today's session. We've also posted a survey on the website conversations.info.yorku.ca, and we look forward to getting your feedback about how we can continue to improve and enhance our future virtual town halls. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today, and I'll now turn it over to President Lenton for the last word.
Thank you so much for monitoring today's town hall, Jade. Look, to close, I just want to thank everyone who has attended the town hall for your participation, your feedback, the questions. I also want to thank the whole team, Lisa, Carol, Amir, Sheila, Lucy, Parissa, for joining me this afternoon, and our events team for continuing to organize these town halls, which we really want to continue. It's an opportunity to have this conversation. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of the required staff at York who have played a critical role in keeping our campuses open for this whole past year, for their continued commitment, their resilience, and their professionalism. We will continue to put the health and safety of our community first. I know that we're very quickly coming up on fall and people want definitive information. So we were looking forward to getting some input on the town hall. We have been consulting with employee groups and other universities. We'll be moving very quickly now to provide more details, clarification on how we would verify vaccination requirements for vaccination for our community, any alternatives, any accommodations that would be available, the timeline that people would have. Our new YorkU screen automated COVID-19 screening tool in the coming days. And of course, I am looking forward to having a reopening of the campuses, more activity on the campuses. I do hear the level of concern, and please know that we are taking a combination of all possible steps that we can to ensure that our campuses are safe for the return this fall. So thank you once all again. Merci, miigwech.